I was a bit of an idiot in some way because I wrote these riffs, and at that point in time, I was writing the riffs and then putting lyrics afterward. But I went to go play the music live, and I'm like, "You dummy! This is really hard to play and sing." And I didn't really think about the fact that, you can do what Paul Stanley did in Detroit Rock City and hit a power chord and sing the verse. It's
What's up, everybody? It's Keefy at GhostCultMan.com. I am so stoked to be joined once again for, I think, the third time in my career, but the second time for Ghost Cult with the great Chris Caffery. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. It's good to see you again. It's great to be back, and I'm really excited about a lot of different things. But it's great to be back to be talking about my release coming up. And God, I blinked my eyes and 20 years went by. So it's crazy. I was like, I better get this stuff out before it's like 30 years of music.
Right.
Like,
Well, we also had like a whole global psychotic break in there somewhere, and
yeah,
we're
exactly. That's
still
what
kind
I
of
always tell people. It's like, no matter what anybody had planned, we got kind of stopped, so
right.
it's like then you had to restart the car, change the engine, get going.
Get it off the cinder blocks, tune it up,
Exactly.
get ready to be road ready. But you are one of my favorite people ever. I'm very grateful that we've gotten to meet in person. They always say don't meet your heroes, but sometimes they turn out to be the best people in the business. I've never heard anyone say a bad word about you. You've always carried yourself, with a certain character that I really respect, not just your art, but yourself. And I think that's really important and something we're kind of losing these days in the business a little bit as the younger generation comes in. I know I sound like get off my lawn, but a little bit get off my lawn. But you have this great solo record coming out, this double record, 20 years of the Music Man on the great, and I mean great Metalville Records. I'm a huge fan of that label and everything they do. We've done many interviews with their artists, and I'm always very humbled and appreciative of them. So let's talk about, like, obviously there's all the things swirling. You're always doing something. You're always so busy. TSO, Savatage tour, everything. But let's talk about this record specifically, and like you said, yeah, it's a good time to get it out now, right? And get in front of people again.
Well, it was actually a complete 20 years that that stuff was recorded in, and a single that I wrote last year, this that's on this record, the "Do You See What I See Now" song that actually is one of the few songs throughout the years that I was recording my solo stuff that had another singer on it. There was Iraq Attack was on my war record, and that was Aliva was singing, and I just did background vocals with him, but I had the song Solitaire on House of Insanity, and that was me and Zach Stevens. So that was like, and then there was, a couple of people might have done a little things in backup land here and there. I know Lonnie Park, he'd done some engineering, some keyboards and some mastering for me, and he'd done some background vocal stuff on the last few records I've done. But, other than that, it was all me. And when I saw Soto with TSO and we were filming the pay-per-view during the COVID time, he was like, "Hey, Cav, man, how come you don't have me sing on your records?" And I was like, "Well, first of all, I sing on my records." And it's like, that's kind of why. I mean, you're a hell of a lot better than me, and I don't want to have you make me look bad or sound bad. But it's like, he's Jeff Scott Soto. I was like, yeah, well, one of these days I'll think of something. And then I wrote this song, and the chorus and pre-chorus, it kind of ticks over from a person singing about a situation to the devil singing about the situation. It's basically about, control, and how a lot of governments and people will control individuals during situations like wars. And when we did the Beethoven's Last Night tour, I just remembered that Jeff did such a great job of being Mephistopheles. He really made a great Mephistopheles, and that was Oliva on the records. But being that Savatage was getting back together, I really couldn't approach him on that. I actually did think of this song as something that could have been put aside for another Butcher record. But once again, since Savatage was going, I was like, well, that would be something that would be delayed too, because, another Savatage record would happen before another Butcher record. So I just wanted to get a song out because it'd been a couple of years since I had released Mayday, and right away said he would do it. And within a couple of days had the vocal performance, and you know, I had Brian Tishy and McNabb on the song, but then I was listening to the guitar solos. I'm like, wow, this is a long solo section. I'm like, let me see. Do I want to have somebody else come in and play guitar? I started thinking about Derek a lot because actually, you know, with his involvement with Soto, is he just came into my mind about something there, and I know that he had offered me, you know, if you ever need any solos or any keyboards, just let me know. So I just texted him and I said, hey, you know, Jeff is singing on a song. When you do some keys, he's like, send it over. And then within a day, he had the tracks back to me. The tracks came back so fast from these guys. And then when I played Derek the song completed with Jeff's stuff and my stuff, he was like, I need to do more because he really liked the tune. So I had like, you know, 14 stereo tracks of keyboards that came with him from him with all these different parts. And I was just so excited to have that in there. So I'm like, well, I got to think of a really good way to release this song. Maybe I could do a 20th year anniversary of the Warped record. Was planning on maybe I could use the original title of Goddamn War and put out my first ever vinyl. So I contacted Holger and Metalville, and they didn't jump on the idea of a double vinyl at that point. He was like, well, why can't you just release the song and, you know, like Mayday? And I had Sick of the Shit and just some unreleased, you know, I had the My Light song that was on their thing, and it says maybe if you had a couple new songs in the set, we could just do one single album. And I was like, well, let me think about that. And I started trying to piece together things, you know, and I found the you know, like Last Time and I Miss You Sometimes and some of these songs I had left from Faces and some other things. And I just didn't like the flow of one record. You know, it was kind of like the new single didn't match them really, and it kind of like weighed a little bit too heavy to the mellow side. So that everything started to piss me off, to coin a phrase. And I was like, well, what if I try to put in some of the songs that I think people who haven't heard them may really like them now, and figure out a way to get some stuff back out as new songs that even though they're old. So in my head, I'm like, pisses me off in Music Man. And then the idea of the 20 years of the Music Man came to me, and I reinvented the wheel and went back to Metalville and managed to sell the idea of doing the, you know, the double LP with the 20 years of the Music Man, because it just kind of made sense to do it that way. I mean, once I showed the track listing and everything, it looked like it was going to be something that was really fun for people to hear. And then my biggest task was whittling down the list of, I think it was 25 or 6 songs down to the ones that were able to fit on the CDs, and then picking exactly which ones were going to be on the LPs. And you know, to get the final list together, I spent a night just going through all my music, and I'm going, geez, first of all, I had a lot of songs out the last 20 years, but it was kind of like writing one record, you know, where you were looking to fill space. And I'm going, okay, well, I have this kind of song and that kind of song. And then, you know, there were obvious ones that I think people would really wanted to hear, like Abandon, and Your Heaven Is Real is a song that really has gotten a ton of, besides Pisses Me Off, that's the most played song that I have on the other digital mediums, which I was like, wow, it's a really cool metal song. And it's pretty close to me because, you know, it's about a real life situation that I did. So I pieced it all together, and you know, it's a really good time for it to be coming out for me. It really
Right on.
is. You know,
Thanks for unpacking all that. You know, I have so many directions to go. By the way, I've interviewed both Soto and Shareni, and that doesn't surprise me at all about Derek. Like, oh, I wanted to put more on it. Like, sounds exactly like him. And if you know him, is you know, he's a perfectionist for sure and a tinkerer. Yeah, I love Your Heaven Is Real. That's actually probably my favorite song on the both CDs. But for you, revisiting some of this stuff that, or you know, that's only been maybe heard by you, or even stuff that's very popular. What surprised you the most listening back to the finished new product? Like, oh, I'm so surprised by how great this was, or I didn't expect this to make me feel a certain way. Is there anything like that?
I think, you know, to be honest with you, I'm beyond me. I'm really kind of surprised because I didn't know exactly what songs Metalville was going to want to pick as singles, and obviously there was certain songs that were unreleased, but they went with Then She's Gone, and I was kind of not necessarily talking about me. I was surprised at the reaction that individual people had given that song. I mean, and I'm talking males, females, young, old, everybody really likes that song, and I guess now I was able to see why the label would pick that to be a single, and it's a definitely a unique song for me to have in my repertoire as a single. So I really like working with Wayne Joyner when he's doing lyric videos, and little by little I've been involving more, actual real stuff into those videos for him. And when I do the video for Do You See What I See Now, it's like me and Jeff are gonna be giving him some footage to use for the vocals. But I think that's something I liked hearing songs that I hadn't heard for a long time. Like last time I picked that up, I'm like, wow, that song is freaking brutal. But I can remember why it just there wasn't enough room to fit it on Faces. And Faces itself, it had so many songs, not necessarily the same, but maybe that in that same kind of tempo and everything. So one of them had to go, and that was the one at that point in time that was left off the record release. But I was happy to have something else from that period of time, and even that "I Miss You Sometimes" song, which it's kind of a double entendre in the way that title can go, because it talks about somebody that was in your life that's gone, and you'd be like, I miss you sometimes. So it's kind of that way. So I enjoyed going through it. I think it was just kind of the flow of everything to the end, and just getting right back to Abandon. And I can remember what I felt like when I first finished that song. That was a time in my life where, all of a sudden everybody kind of disappeared from where I was. I was staying in the Savatage house in Astoria, New York, and that's where we were staying doing Savatage and TSO recording. But things were starting to move a little bit away from New York City, and I started to be pretty alone there at that period of time, which is funny because it wasn't even really that long of a period of time, but I was already like traumatized because you was like 8 months later and there was no Savatage, and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So I just started writing, and that's where Abandoned had came from. But it was at that point in time that I realized when I was writing music that I wasn't that bad of a singer, and it was kind of fun for me to finish my own songs. And I didn't have any desire to join any other band. I just wanted to make music, so that's where I headed.
You are much better than not that bad of a singer. Your singing's terrific, and I think this helped me, really like flip through memory lane like a picture book about how good a singer you actually are. And also because you write for other singers, you know what a good song, you know what a good melody is, you know how to write hooks. And so I think that comes through in a lot of this material also.
Well, thank you. You know what's funny though, when I recorded Faces and the War record at first, I was a bit of an idiot in some way because I wrote these riffs, and at that point in time I was writing the riffs and then putting lyrics afterwards. As records went on, I had written choruses and lyrics and songs and put the music around it. But I went to go play the music live, and I'm like, you dummy, this is really hard to play and sing. And I didn't really think about the fact that, you can do what Paul Stanley did in Detroit Rock City and hit a power chord and sing the verse. It's like I kept the freaking, I'm not Geddy Lee. It's not, I can't, pat your head and rub your stomach or whatever it is. I was like, oh man, some of this stuff like is really off time with the riff. And it was kind of like as I went on writing more, I figured that out a little bit better. I'd taken some vocal lessons, and I got to be an actual better singer. The way I used my voice was kind of just like the way I used my guitar. There's electric and acoustic guitars and hard and soft parts, and that's how I was using my voice. I was kind of just fueling it in like an instrument in all the songs. So whatever version of it I felt that I needed is what wound up in each song. Because that's the one thing that is actually pretty cool about my voice, is that there's lots of different timbres and things that I can use with it. And I was schooled by a lot of really good people. Whether it was Oliva on the heavy stuff when he first heard my solo record, and he was listening to me sing, and he's like, "You figured it out." And he knew that I've kind of figured out where he was able to find that rasp in his vocal cord. And as time went on, I just became, a better singer. It's always funny with that though, because you look at somebody like, and I use him always in this example, somebody like Richie Kotzen, who is, one of the greatest singers on the planet, but because he started out as a guitar player, people always think of him as a guitarist. So, I'm in that kind of thing where, I'd look at the reviews of my records, and people would be like, wow, that's great. You should get a great singer. And I'm like, don't you understand? Like, the reason why I did these records is that so I can make music on my own. I wanted to sing when I was a kid, but my brother and the guys in my band, they kind of thought my voice sounded a little teeny. And at that time, you were listening to Dickinson and Halford and Coverdale and Jeff Tate and Steve Perry and you had Lou Graham. It was just like the singers were so freaking good that when you were looking for a singer for your band, you were looking for freaking Paul Rogers, and it was not always that easy to find someone that good, but it also wasn't that easy to sing that good, especially when I didn't know. I mean, I always thought like a voice, like you were either born Ray Gillen or you weren't. I didn't realize that you could actually school your voice, and some people do have it very naturally. There's, some little kids that are singing, opera like at 5 years old. It's like it took me some time to figure it out, but when I got Pro Tools and I was able to correct my mistakes and do some overdubs, and I never used any of the pitch shifting stuff, but I was able to listen to something and say, well, that kind of stinks, and then I would do it over again and over again. And when I finally finished, I think it was the song Music Man, I actually almost started crying because I was like, wow, I can do this myself. And it was a really good feeling because whether or not anybody liked what I did, I liked doing it. So from that point, I really didn't care if a critic or anybody liked it. I was like, this for me is fun. I have my piece of art that could, get laughed at, and maybe 200 years from now, it's a masterpiece. But for right now, it's how I felt, and it made me feel a lot better. And as I wrote more and more songs, I just kept going. So I wrote like 70 songs and recorded 30 of them in my first studio sessions that I got with my record deal. And I could have taken, it was a good deal. I could have taken money and bought a car. And I was like, no, I'm going to sit in the studio for 3 months, order takeout food, and record way too many songs. And that's what I did with Faces and Warped. It was like I just was so into being in there every day and doing my own stuff. And as time went on, it just kept going and gathered to where it is now. And I think that it's a pretty good compilation of how the roller coaster inside my brain goes musically. There's the sarcastic side, there's the instrumental side, there's the acoustic side, there's harmonies, there's a lot of metal. It's just me.
Right on. So I only have a few more for you, but so many directions to take this in. Is it safe to say of the unreleased material, this is the best unreleased material you have left, or just the stuff that was most inspiring you to put out there?
It's the best quality of unreleased material I had left. So there was really no unreleased material that I thought was album quality. I have a lot of songs that are not like they're not finished by a specific drummer or in that kind of way. I have tons of demo stuff. I mean, it's like, yeah, I have lots of unreleased songs and lots of songs that I could finish tomorrow. I mean, as you went through the records, a lot of Pins and Needles music was written at the time of Faces, but at that point in time, Nick Chimbukas, the engineer, he kind of wanted to get involved co-producing me on that record, and we wound up taking my songs and digesting them and like producing them in a really cool way. I mean, the Pins record, I think, went over a lot of people's heads because every song was an album on that record. It was all real crazy. That's why it was so hard for me to find something to put on this. And I actually chose like one of the simplest songs that was on that record to go on this one, And the main reason was, You Gotta Be Fucking Kidding Me had the wrong song title on iTunes. It came out as It's Sad, so it never actually was released under the right title. So I wanted to like say if I did have a day when something made me say that saying, I couldn't really place it up there. I had to hide the titles. So now it kind of goes in my little trifecta of funny swear songs, which pisses me off and sick of this shit. You got to be fucking kidding me. It's like the little trifecta of funny swear tunes, and it actually gets its first place. But songs like The Time and Worms and Walls, I mean, that Pins and Needles record went over everybody's head. I remember doing some interviews after I finished it, and some of the critics who loved Faces and magazine, people I knew from the Savatage time, were like, I don't understand this record. And I was like, oops, and I think that one had some really magical moments on it, but it was, I think, a little bit too off the wall. And I really like that. I think that record, I want to have it re-released again, with the correct titles and put out. And I think as of now, it's not even. I think it's fallen off some of the major media, the digital media and stuff like that. So I'd like to just have, like maybe Metalville just put that back out. It doesn't even really need to be an official re-release of it, just to get it back out there again. But yeah, there's a lot of tunes when you listen to like Seasons Change was a song that I had recorded and done at the time of those demos for the Faces record. If you listen to Feeling of a White Lie was a song that I had from back then, and the Watch song, which is a song I wrote about strip bars, that was from back then. There was pieces of a lot of things that were out of that time, and I still probably have another 20 or 30 of those songs floating around that are unreleased, but they're back from that time. And a lot of that music is really freaking cool, but it's in bad demo versions, not bad, but just not releasable as an album. But there's some pretty cool music, there definitely is.
We'll stay tuned and keep our fingers crossed that more stuff will be forthcoming in the future. Not that you need another hobby or another project to work on, doing everything you do. You have been so lucky to work with just a dream come true type list of collaborators. Who's somebody out there you would love to work with you have never worked with?
Unfortunately, Ronnie James Dio, but that was my dream gig and dream record, would have been to do that. And he always knew that. We spoke about it all the time, and he would sit there and say to people in his circle that I knew that, I've got to do this record with Chris one day, because I think he knew how much it would have meant to me to do that album. I think, as far as other people out there right now, I mean, I would love to do, I think it would be fun to do something with Richie, with Faulkner. I mean, it's like me and him are like from the same egg, and I think me and him together could really do some cool metal. But I'm not really looking to do any kind of other projects right now. There's so many different singers and people that I respect and I like, and there's really cool ones that are obscure and troublemakers in a lot of ways out there in the business that would be fun to work with. But I kind of like to stay away from other people's drama. So there's like some people that you could work with that it might be a nightmare. You never know, but I like their stuff, and I'm not going to mention names because it'll be on a blabbermouth thing. Caffrey said, but it's always like that. I'm always, you find that one quote that gets out there, and it's like, I don't, like I really do like Richie a lot, and I'd love to work with Roy Z again on something at some point in time, because he was a lot of fun to work with. It's just Spirits of Fire never proceeded any further, and of course, at any point in time I wouldn't mind doing something else once again with Ripper, because he's just he's as good as it gets. So yeah, I think it'd be fun for me to do more with Soto, down the road in that kind of way. It's just like I said, I like working with people. I like writing. I like playing with people. You know, the guitar players in my band are fun. Me and Al had talked about, you know, doing music like Hughes Thrall point in time, and having a, you know, a cool, like, you know, the old Pat Travers kind of stuff in a record with me and him. He had talked about putting together a band of you know, music like that and the Allman Brothers, where he played keyboards and I played guitar. It's just like, you know, that kind of thing. So there's so many great musicians that I get blessed with the opportunity to work with that, you know, the list could go on, ones that I'd like to do outside work with.
Right on. We'd love to see it. High school me would never forgive me for not asking you, obviously, what it's been like for you to step back and do Savatage again. It's been a couple of years in the making, and things. I know all the U.S. fans are dying for you guys to come over here and do something extensive. Obviously, it has to make sense for you, you know, economically in this climate today. But what's it been like for you to just come back and, you know, do these shows and take on these songs again that I know they mean so much to the fans and you?
Well, I know it means a lot to the fans, and me as a fan, I feel that same emotion. But me as Chris Caffery, the musician, it is probably one of the things that's made me the happiest that I could explain anything making me in my life. I miss that band, you know. It's like I have a blessing with TSO. It's, you know, the greatest freaking show on earth. You know, it's an amazing thing to be a part of. I've been there since day one. I love doing that every single year. But you know, I tell it to people where it's like your parents take you to the nicest resort hotel in the world on the nicest beach somewhere in the freaking, you know, $10,000 a night hotel room, and that's that. And then all of a sudden you get a chance to go back to Disneyland, you know, and that's what Savatage is for me. You know, the kid inside me that looked at Kiss Alive and watched Judas Priest when I was 11, and you know, dreamed of being the metal guitar player, was living that in Savatage. You know, that was me. It's like when I was singing my solo thing, that was me singing. It was a different world. That opportunity for me to be, you know, in that KK Downing position on stage and to be that guy in the metal band was just what I did on the Gutter Ballet tour and what I did with Savatage. So getting that back, it just felt like it's crazy. When we did the big festival, the first show in Brazil, and I watched the Scorpions start their show, and they started with Coming Home. I mean, it's exactly how it felt. Felt like I was home. You know, when I walked onto those stages the night before to do sound check, I was like, this is just, you know, I miss this. This is what I was born to be doing, was that, you know, that raw metal world. It's not, like I said, I love playing in TSO. It's a dream gig for so many people, and it's so much fun, and it's the greatest freaking production in the world. I always tell everybody it's the greatest playground you could possibly have as a musician on stage with that production and everything. But you know, it's like Savatage was what I did as a little kid. You know, I was 19 and got in that band and went out and opened for Dio and Megadeth, and went out when MTV had Headbangers Ball and played with Aliva on the Gutter Ballet tour. It's just like that part of me was missing. It was like a gap in the middle of, you know, TSO and, you know, Chris Caffery being the human being that does hot sauce and gardening and everything else. It was like that bridge in the middle was kind of missing in my life, that balance. And I think that balance is back, you know, and as life gets more challenging a lot of times when you get older, between your family and health and things you might encounter that you weren't expecting, you know, amongst that, as everybody does as we get older, and other things that happen in the world as we're dealing with things, you know, even things like COVID and stuff like that. You had a balance that I think for me was missing. And to be honest with you, a lot of that balance was something I was able to get off of Paul when he was alive, because when I needed the support and I needed the balance, I would call him, you know. And when Paul passed away, I'm like, who do I call to talk about Paul? You know, I can't call Paul to talk about Paul. So it was like I always leaned on him, you know, throughout everything. And, you know, I think having Savatage back, especially with the fact that he was the one that create who I was in that band as a position in that band, I think it helps me feel closer to him. It helps me feel closer to Chris, and it just like I said, it just balances me out a lot, and I really missed it, man. I think that it didn't feel any different or feel like it was 23 years at all since we played, a Savatage tour. It just felt like it was a couple years, and we were just back up on stage again. So for me, it was it's awesome, man. It's awesome.
Right on. Thank you for sharing all that. Obviously, I'm hoping 2026 is the year America gets back to Sabotage or Sabotage gets back to us. And of course, I just want to, as we close this down, I just want to, since you mentioned TSO again, I'm just so grateful. Charity is a big part of, I think to be charitable is one of the best human experiences possible. And the good work you have done, not just these incredible shows and like the kiss of Christmas, whatever you want to call it. I think the charitable arm of TSO shows it means the most to me. And thank you and the whole everybody that's involved in doing that because what you guys
That's
bring to communities is huge.
that's Paul and the O'Neill
Yeah.
family and Paul's whole idea of, those single acts of kindness. I mean, I would go to and from the studio with Paul late at night and before we jump into a taxi cab or a car service to go back into Astoria from Manhattan when he was staying in his writing apartment. I would just watch him approach people on the street and it was amazing to see how he would walk up to these complete strangers and fill their hands with something that could take care of them. He was very giving. I'm not talking about giving him a sandwich. He would hand them, the ability to eat for a month, and it would be kind of amazing to see that and experience that. And that is what we've done at every single show. It's over $20 million has gone back to people that makes everybody feel good. And that was just Paul. He wanted to be able to give back to people, and that is something that TSO's always done and will never stop doing. And it feels good to me because at this time when there's obviously a lot of people out there that aren't as fortunate and in a lot of different situations and people that need help with different parts of their health. And like I said, I've seen these kind of situations, especially more as you get older and you get elderly family members that start to get into those situations. You realize how important these outside helps become to every situation that these people are in, because the more you can give, the easier it makes it for people to be able to help them on the outside as well. I mean, it's a good feeling to know that we're giving back.
Right on. And that's a good place to end. Chris, always a pleasure talking to you. 20 Years of the Music Man is out June 13th on Metalville Records. Next time, I hope to see you in person at one of these things or somewhere around in the world. Of course, we'll keep coming back if you keep making the music. Thanks so much for hanging with Ghost Cult and me today. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. It's great to come back, and I'm looking forward to everybody getting a chance to pick this up, and I'm actually really looking forward to everybody hearing the lead off single of the day when the record comes out, that song with Soda, because it's a pretty cool metal tune, and I think that that shows a lot of the roots that I have in metal in that song, and I think people will enjoy that. Listen a lot. It's a cool tune.
Rad, man. Man of a thousand riffs and solos. Chris, thank you so much, buddy.
Thank you. Have a good night.